The Code 3. A live podcast sponsored by the Marin Fire History Group. All about the history of the fire service in Marin County, California.
I'm Bruce Selfridge. I'm retired fire captain from the town of Ross. When we had our own fire department, I started at the age 17. When I was become a volunteer. Technically, we weren't supposed to be. You're supposed to be 18, but the fire chief then said just budget on your application because he wanted me to come in. So that was in 1973. Then I worked here for 37 years, starting as a volunteer firefighter, became a volunteer captain, eventually full-time, and then I retired here and spent my entire fire career with the town of Ross. My brother started as a volunteer 10 years prior to me, and he eventually went on to be deputy chief with the Marin County Fire Department. And I grew up here in town. I like to say that I lived in town till I retired because I spent a good portion of the time sleeping here when we were on duty, and enjoyed working here in town, enjoyed the people. Sadly, a lot of the people that I knew aren't around anymore, but it was a great place to work, and I had great fun here. Thank you.
We're in front of the famous Ross map, the Ross Fire Station with Bruce Selfridge today, and we're going to talk about the historical significance of this map and how it tied into fire response and emergency response here. Bruce, take it away. Why don't you tell me a little bit about this?
Okay, this map has a wealth of information. If we got a phone call of a fire, we would have an address. So say if it's number 10 Walnut Avenue, which is my old house, I look at it, I know where it is, I know where the closest hydrant is, and these little number 37s here was the firebox at that intersection. So then, now that we have that 37, we can go back to the alarm board, put up number 37, pull the hook. The volunteers would hear the horn going off. Meanwhile, we're driving to the incident on Walnut, and that's how we would kind of go backwards. Right. We're given, we have the number here, and then we have to then get the wheel. Rather than waiting for the number to come up over there, then getting the address, we would, come here and get that number, and that's what would help us get to the address. We had these little blue dots are swimming pools. The colored bigger ones are our hydrants. When I started, there wasn't any blue ones. We improved the system, so we started getting the blue ones, which are the best hydrants.
And we talked about this getting to Walnut Avenue, and today all our homes are numbered with the house numbers on it. But I understand when you started, not all the homes, not all the streets had street addresses. How did that come to be?
Well, originally they didn't have street addresses because we did not have mail delivery in Ross. Everybody had a P.O. box, so there was no reason to put a number out for mail delivery. So a lot of the homes, the homeowners said, we do not have street numbers. And I said, well, as we getting ready to implement 911, we need to have street numbers for all the houses in town. So we had to go out, confirm that the numbers were in place, confirm that they had the correct number. If they didn't have a number, we assigned them a number. Francis Drake was a problem because the numbers started at both ends, so we had to renumber that street. But that was the only street where we basically had to renumber. But we went through town and made sure that everybody had their street number. There was a lot of reluctance at the time that, we don't have street numbers. We live in Ross. You should know where we live. Say, we do, but maybe Kentfield or Santa Fe, somebody else is responding, may not. And with the 911 system, they have to have a specific street address for each residence.
And when did this change take place?
When they implemented 911, which I believe was in the late 80s.
Yeah, maybe late 70s.
Yeah, late 70s. I'm not sure.
So let me ask this. If I was going to go to your house, I was coming from out of town, and it wasn't 10 Walnut because there was no 10. How do I know which house on Walnut belongs to my friend Bruce Selfridge?
It was difficult, and
I would think.
Back in those days, we didn't have a lot of mutual aid, so we didn't have to worry about the Kentfield and the Santa Fe engines finding the address.
Sure.
Oftentimes, when somebody pulled a box, we just have to go to that box and look for the smoke, and hopefully there's somebody out in the street to flag us down. Or if somebody called it in and they didn't have didn't have street numbers, we would tell people, go out in front, flag us down, let us know where we're going. And it was difficult, but Tom Valet and I both grew up here in town, so we were fortunate to know a good percentage of these homes. We've been in them, or we knew the people, we knew the previous owners, so we had kind of an advantage over most people. But
and what would I do if I was coming from San Francisco and I was coming over to your house? I just had to find Walnut and then look for, you would say, I'm in the house with the blue door, the green color or something.
It
was that simple.
Yeah, we didn't have a street number for the good percentage of the time I lived at the house. So, we were on the intersection of Walnut and Olive, the brown house, the white trim. You had to give a little description. You had to tell them, precisely where we were,
sure.
Color of the house, and it's just that's the way you did it. You knew you didn't have a street number, and for years we didn't have a street number, and I picked 10 because it just worked out with it, and that's why we have 10, because I picked that number out at that time we were putting the numbers out.
And then you would know that, for instance, that's the Ashford's house, that's the Berry's house. You would know these homes by the owner because people didn't move around like they do today either.
Yeah, and we were very diligent to keep the names up as best we could on this map. We would get lists from the town hall when houses changed. We would use to upgrade the map. We had a lot of citizenry that would come into the fire station for a variety of reasons back then. We had a rat bait that we gave out that was manufactured by the county. We had dog licenses here. We had burn permits here. So there's an influx of people coming in, and every time somebody come in, they always want to find their house on the map.
Sure.
And they say, oh, well, here's my house, but the Smiths, she died, and now it's the Browns. Oh, okay, thank you for letting us know. And we would erase Smith and write in Brown. And so we were always constantly trying to keep the map up as best we could with the current names on them. Sometimes we put the old name because everybody knew it as the Buck House. So we put that in parentheses, but then we put the new name next to it because somebody would say, oh, I live across the street from the Buck House. Well, I know where it was, but somebody else that got hired after me wouldn't know. So that we.
Now that's the old Barrel Buck estate.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah, she lived here. Her attorney lived here, and that's where he made his fortune setting up her trust, and as well as other things, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
good. Now, how did this map come to be? Because I see in the corner here 1970. Now, we talked before. This fire station was built in 1927. We had a 1928 Mac living in here. But this is a very, very cool map. So why don't you tell me about, what's the story behind this guy?
This map was made in 1970 by Mr. Foster and Mr. Fitzgerald. They did it as a college project. I believe I think they were surveyors, and they made this map. It was nice because it's made out of plastic. We could write in pencil on it and erase it. The map that this replaced is around the corner, and it was basically paper. And so it was a lot more fragile than this map, and you couldn't write and erase as easily on it. And this is white. The other one wasn't white, so it helped. And there's a soft wood underneath it, so we could put our little push pins in for the various hydrants and swimming pool locations and things. But this map, a lot of departments have run books, but with Ross being less than 2 square miles, it's very easy for us to just use this map and
it really tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah,
the roads, the hydrants, the box alarm, the box numbers on it. It's a size. It's a manageable size.
Yes.
And it's manageable size. You can go. Okay, I got to go to Walnut, so I'm going to go down here and up here. You can easily, for a firefighter, especially under the gun a little bit, it's an easy map to read.
Yeah, and you know, those of us that work here for 30 plus years, we knew where all the hydrants were.
Sure.
We've painted them, we've cleaned around them, but you know, the new kids don't. It's handy to know that, okay, if this house is on fire, another engine could come in this road and have a different hydrant than the one we're using, and it puts things in perspective. You don't realize that how close one street is to another, and without this map, it just makes everything a little more perspective.
Yeah, it gives you a good visual. Yeah. I had a fire. I had a fire one afternoon up on Hillside, and Tom Valet was responding from Ross, and I was working an overtime shift, and I didn't work that many shifts with Tom, but Jim Galley worked generally with opposite Tom Valet, and they talked about a fire on this street, how they'd come in, and what unique about this situation was we pulled up on the scene, the house was on fire, and we had the PG&E lines down across the road. They were live. The asphalt was smoking, so we knew, how am I going to get to my fire hydrant? Well, Tom and Jim had talked about this situation before. Tom came from the other direction, was able to pick up the hydrant on the high side of Hillside, and that's just knowing each other and working with each other and knowing, crossing jurisdictional lines that with this particular incident it worked out really, really well because of the communication they'd had prior to building this relationship prior to the incident. Now, as I recall, this is before this map was built, you guys had a train station in town.
Yes.
And is that right away, and where would that be here on the, how did that lay there, Bruce?
The train station was where the post office currently is, and the current post office is a rendition of that old station. It's stucco with a tile roof like this one, and the train station was here. The train ran along the creek, which is now a canal, and Sylvan Lane was the old railroad right-of-way, and it crossed.
Just right behind us here.
Yeah, and the train crossed what they call, on the map here, called the Phoenix Gulch Creek, before it merges with Corderdera Creek, and continued on up into San Anselmo. But that train was there from the late 1800s up till the 1930s. And so, the fire department, had a crossing on Lagunitas where we would cross the tracks to get to the rest of the town.
Yeah, you had a railroad. You had to deal with a railroad crossing in order to get to that side of town. Then.
Yeah.
And so the railroad track basically followed the creek from San Anselmo through Ross all the way down to Kentfield, down by where the Woodland Market is today, right?
Yeah. It never crossed Corderdera Creek. It crossed what they call on this map Phoenix Gulch Creek, which is the creek that comes out of Phoenix Lake.